Good afternoon and greetings from London. My name is Anastasia Vanavskaya, and on behalf of Fortuda, I would like to welcome you to the food and beverage edition of our Travel and Hospitality webinar series. People need to eat and drink, and most people like eating and drinking. Even COVID wasn't able to change this. What it has had an impact on is, of course, the business of serving food and drink. Today, we will be talking about how to bring this business back. Doing so will probably require certain transformations and reinventions, but ultimately the process will be a progression that was a long time coming and in many instances not caused but catalyzed by the global pandemic. We have a fantastic panel today comprising very interesting and valuable mix of different geographies, brands, business models, and product offerings. Unfortunately, Laura De Vega is not able to join us. She lost her voice due to a cold, and as you understand, that makes her participation in the webinar impossible. She apologizes profoundly, and hopefully she will be able to join us at a future event. I will now introduce our present panelists, and then, as is traditional at Fortuda's webinars, we will ask them to say a few words about themselves and what they have done work-wise so far today. So, for our food and beverage hospitality webinar, we are joined by Philip Blazer, Vice President, Food and Beverage, Asia Pacific from Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, and Nicolas Gagols, Vice President, Food and Beverage, Luxury Brands Europe from Accor Hotels. Philip, would you like to say a few words about yourself? And given it is 10 p.m. in Singapore, how much work have you done today and how tired are you?
Well, thank you. And first of all, hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us. And I'm honored to be able to speak to all of you. As Anastasia introduced me, I'm Philip, and I work for Four Seasons. I oversee the food and beverage function for us here in Asia Pacific. A little bit about myself. My father was a chef, and I grew up always in kitchens and always somehow near to chocolates. So I grew up in a culinary and a food and beverage family. Food and beverage has always been something near and dear to me. Restaurants and bars are sort of really my passion. My career spans from working in small luxury hotels to bigger organizations like Marriott International, and then joining Four Seasons for 4 years now. So in this role for 4 years, it's been a fantastic journey. Great to see lots of transformation and focus put on restaurants and bars. So that's a little bit on me, and I guess over to Nick.
Thank you very much, Philip. Hi, everyone, and thank you all for being here. So I'm kind of a similar experience than Philip, and I didn't know that. I grew up in the same environment, kind of. My family always owned restaurants. So since I was 10 years old, I was bussing table all around the room, right? I had the chance to grow up in the south of France, and then I started my career with Four Seasons as well, same than Philip. I spent a little bit of time in Europe and then in America, and I was then in charge of the Château 5 in Paris for 2 years. So I just joined Accor about 18 months ago. I oversee now Accor luxury brand, such as Raffles, Fairmont, Sofitel, Orient Express. So I have about 50 hotels in my perimeter, with about 10 hotels that are going to open in the next 2 years. So I'm very, very happy to be here, and I can't wait for that discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic. I love it when our panelists talk about themselves and their day. By the way, all the members of the panel today have joined this webinar from major travel locations: Singapore, Italy, and Great Britain in my case. Food and beverage has always been an important part of the travel experience. And in your opinion, where does it now rank on the list of preferences and sought-after experiences of hotel guests, your customers? Philip, shall we start with you on this one, please?
Absolutely. So, food and beverage in restaurants and bars has always been sort of, the epicenter of our hotel or hospitality business, but also is also the life and soul of a city, right? All these beautiful restaurants and bars generate a great amount of energy, great amount of buzz. So I see restaurants and bars taking a front seat, especially now where people are limited in their travels and our guests are yearning for experiences. So this is really the time now for restaurants and bars to shine, especially as we see some markets rebounding and coming back. And we see an uptick, right, in our business as well, and people coming in trying to celebrate, trying to put away the COVID fears and the COVID fatigue to the side and really experience something outside of their four walls, I would assume.
Wonderful. Nicolas, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Philip. What I think it's really important is that when our guests will come back to the hotel and to the restaurant, it's to ensure that they feel safe first, right? That's the most important, I think. And I think as a brand, Accor has done tremendous thing with that, right? By promoting and giving guideline and process to all our hotels, especially in Europe. With the all safe, guidance, right? And in plus, we if they wanted, hotel could, hire a third party such as, Bureau Veritas to give credit to those guidelines. Second, what I think it's important is really to, as Philip mentioned, is the create the memorable experience by building loyalty and guest connection, right? It's gaining the experience that we had, taking all the information from I would say the previous stay of our guest to build and to tailor those experience. And then at the end, I think that the third thing that is very important for me is I think it's to offer better value, right? When you are a guest and you enter a restaurant, right, you want to be brought downstairs with the chef sommelier that goes with you to the cellar, right, and ask you to pick and choose your wine for the dinner, right, and you want to go back to that kind of restaurant where the team create that emotional connection with you, right? So that's very, very important, I think, yes.
Okay, it's great to know that the F&B part of the business is not losing its position and in some ways even gaining a high status. Now, how do you support these developments in the current situation? What are the main strategic changes you had to deploy as a result of COVID-19? Nicolas, shall we start with you on this one, please?
Yeah, I think that first adaptability and flexibility is very, very important, right? All our hotel have a big loss in food and beverage revenue because all restaurants and bars were closed, right? So when we start to open, it was important for us to come up with some solution, I would say. And, if I need to take an example, I think that Ghost Kitchen is one of them, right? We have, for example, in France, if I need to give the France example, we have 3 now hotels that operate with Ghost Kitchen, with one of them with a top chef from a TV show. So it's great in terms of guest experience, but it's also great in terms of owner experience, right? And because they get directly a lease, a revenue based on that kitchen, and it's not a lot of investment, I would say, for an owner to do those kind of things, because you already have the base, right? You have the salary, you have the kitchen equipment, everything is already in place, right? And then what's also important is to diversify, I would say, the experience, right? It's for example, come up with some special solution in your room, right? Maybe doing some day use with a business lunch, or create package in the spa, right, where your guests can still use the amenity of the hotel, right? So those things are very important, I think.
Thank you, Nicolas. Philip, how would you characterize the strategic changes implemented by Four Seasons?
So I think primarily one is safety, right? We've implemented, similar to our peers, a safety program. We call it Lead with Care. We partner with Johns Hopkins Medical Institute. So I think that number one, that we want to make sure that our guests feel safe in coming back to our restaurants and bars and our hotels, but also more importantly, our employees feel safe coming back to work, being able to come back to work in a safe environment, making sure that we have protocols and procedures in place that makes them feel secure. As we know, if the employee feels good, they'll be able to do their job better. So that is number one. The second thing, which I see us even more than pre-COVID, was to become more nimble in how we deliver our service, how innovative we have been in trying to bring new experiences to our guests. So I mean, one of them would be obviously the rise of a takeaway business, but not only, club sandwiches and burgers and fried noodles or anything like that, but also really trying to develop experiences you can take home. May it be, recipes with a video of our chefs or our bartenders, so you could be able to recreate some of the dishes at home, or even, a takeaway afternoon tea set, which we've been highly successful of, across the globe, not only in Asia Pacific, but also in the Americas and in EMEA. So that I think is some of our strategic changes. The other thing is also being strategic with the spaces we have in our hotels, right? With restrictions of number of guests in restaurants, we transformed certain areas into extensions of restaurants. Say our meeting and events facilities that could be then switched on to create in-house experience for some of our staycation guests. May it be an afternoon tea for children with a go-kart round, or in Bali, what we did there was fantastic. To drive rooms revenue, we had a fantastic Sunday brunch or weekend brunch in our restaurant. So using food and beverage to attract guests to stay in our hotel. So if you were to spend a certain amount of money on a weekend brunch with us, you would get a complimentary night to stay with us, which then generates more opportunity for us for incremental spend. So, it was interesting to see how resort and urban hotels used the opportunity to drive more revenue.
Absolutely. This whole situation, this new normal, actually is a fantastic exercise in watching people's behavior, the way they change, the way they take things differently depending on the circumstances they find themselves in. And of course, us learning from it, making conclusions, and then implementing those in our business. You both mentioned a few new formats you had to introduce during the various lockdowns. Has it anyhow affected the way you position your F&B outlets to your customers? Who would like to start on that one?
Happy to take that. Obviously, we had to look at our positioning. There was a bit of averseness first to some of our guests coming into our restaurants. So we had to position ourselves as a safe environment, as I mentioned to before, but also making sure there is a value proposition. I know Nick's mentioned that before. And the value proposition was not necessarily cheaper or less expensive, but actually providing an experience, as lots of people have been stuck at home for a very long time. But really sort of upping the game in terms of if it is one-on-one chefs academies with our retreats, or if it's sandbank dinners in the Maldives, that we would up these experiences so that guests could somehow escape and enjoy themselves, right? Because they've been stuck at home, not being able to travel. So really just trying to develop more experiences in a safe environment. So that's something which was really great to see, and it was also very welcome, right? So people tend to spend more coming out of COVID than being more conservative in terms of their spending. So it was really how you position yourself.
Absolutely. As always, it's all about positioning. And I'm pleased to hear that your customers are happy to share their money with your company, with your hotel chain. Nicola, what about Accor? Has your positioning undergone any changes, or it remains similar to what it used to be?
You know, Anastasia, I think what was important, because as you may know, in the luxury environment, I would say a big component of our guests are coming, big chunk of the guests are coming from, America, Asia, Middle East, right? So it's an international guest that we are normally greeting in the different hotels. Unfortunately, during that time, all those guests were not coming, right? So what was important for us was we start to communicate again with our local guests, right? More and more with the local people, right? The one that, drive your business in a daily basis, right? That was important, right? So, we were reinforcing this delivery experience, this click and collect experience, right? How great is it when you come on a Saturday afternoon and you're going to be greeted by the pastry chef, giving you that beautiful tart in your hands and explaining you how he's going to create that recipe, right? So I think it's how you connect with the local people, right? That was very important, and how you keep that connection until, I will say, the different restaurants will open, right? That was important, I think.
And did you experience any changes in how you had to approach the local people versus those foreigners you mentioned before?
No, I don't think so. It was just to reinforce, I will say, empathy, kindness, generosity, right? What's, hospitality at the end is all about, right? That's the most important.
Absolutely. After all, we're all people, doesn't matter where we come from. Okay, enough of strategy. Now let's talk about operations a little bit. How has the operational side evolved to maintain profit margins? Nicolas, would you like to address that?
I understand that hospitality is a business, and I totally agree with you, right? But what was important for us, it was ensure that first, our employee was safe, that where our employee were happy to be back, that our employee were trained correctly, that we're giving a lot of love to our employee. That was the most important thing. The second thing was our customer, our guests, right? What are we doing to ensure that we build that relation again with them? How are we going to build that loyalty? How are we going to create something to ensure that as well they're going to come back to your restaurant on a weekly basis, right? As soon as you get those 2 points right, there is no reason why profit will not come after, right? So I think that, profit will come. That's not the most important. Important thing is employee, customer first.
If I may chime in here, Anastasia, for us, obviously it's no secret, profit margins go down. Some hotels are in the red numbers during this difficult and trying time. We've seen lots of freestanding restaurants close in multiple locations. So I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture here. I think, what was really vital for us was, in managing profit margins, was ensuring that we manage our inventories, our costs, our labor very tightly. And that was something which I'm very proud of our team, especially in Asia Pacific, where, we really look at menu engineering, and optimizing that and ensuring that that's linked directly to our purchasing system. So the executive chefs and the F&B directors are in full control of their inventory. They can also manage their offering in a much more precise manner. And of course, working closely with our partners, right? Food and beverage, although is the heartbeat of our hotels and the gateway to the Four Seasons experience, it's, it doesn't work alone. We have strong partners in finance and purchasing, which we work together with tirelessly to get, the best possible product for the best possible price, as well as our colleagues in marketing, making sure that we get the right message out. So, but yeah, managing those profit margins was key. for us. But yeah, it's I'm not lying. It's been a tough year plus just to manage that, and owner expectations are still there, right? It's not a charity. It is still a business.
Absolutely. I'd like to summarize the answers you both gave by people and processes. If you take care of both elements, you will be in a better place than those who don't do that. In terms of profit-making opportunities, how does the diversification of revenue streams look in F&B hospitality? And no less importantly, what new revenue streams will survive the post-pandemic? Philip, would you like to share your opinion?
Sorry, you just broke off. Do you mind saying that question again, please?
Of course.
Sorry.
No problem. How does the diversification of revenue streams look in F&B hospitality? And what new revenue streams will survive post-pandemic?
Great question. I think the realm of e-commerce is something that's going to stay. And we'll see quite a bit of e-commerce in the future. I think during these times of crises, new opportunities arise. So I see that as a huge opportunity for the future. We have in our hotels globally look at a uniform sort of e-commerce platform for our hotels to offer food and beverage in a succinct manner, which is on brand and a good customer experience. We're still piloting through these, but over the next couple of months, we see that as a huge opportunity. We see, especially in all three regions of ours, hotels that have these platforms are able to drive revenue, even if everything is closed in their market. So I think that is a huge opportunity for the future, and also how you can sell experiences on e-commerce. The other side is how we look at certain functionalities in our hotels, underutilized spaces, and how we can switch these on in times of high demand. This is really nothing too new, but due to the pandemic and the crises, we realized that the opportunity is so perishable. If you don't seize that opportunity to manage your venues, then you lose out. So I think those are sort of key things that will survive the pandemic, as well as what I mentioned, in my previous answer, how you manage to the T your whole procurement process integrated into your POS, and so I think that's something which I see as good management and good business practice.
Thank you, Philip. Nicolas?
I agree part of it with Philip about the e-commerce. I think that the digital is just at the beginning, right? There is still some great thing to achieve as a company. We see more and more people going on Instagram, sharing things, and those kind of thing. And I think that that part is still something to develop, right? As a company as well, we're gonna develop a new platform, food and beverage platform, that we're gonna launch in July, where people can directly go on it and do booking online only for restaurant and bars for Accor in Europe, right? But they're gonna have the possibility to do that, but also to go on a link where they're gonna chat, maybe with the chef, or they're gonna give them recipes of the new dish that they created, right? So it's gonna be something super with a lot of interaction. But it's again creating that connection with the guest through digital, right? And second thing, we're gonna have to stay flexible, no matter what, right? When you don't have these business guests coming in your hotel for 1 or 2 years, right? What are you gonna do with all your banquet space, right? And those are the things, knowing that I spent quite time in operation, right? And you know that the profit from food and beverage is mainly coming from the banquet, right? So it's going to be all those people going to adapt and be flexible. The faster, the better, right? So to go back to your banquet and event space, right, is okay, I'm going to change that into a kids club for maybe the summer season, right, when I'm going to attract family that maybe I didn't have before in my hotel, right? So we really have to think outside of the box on those kind of things.
Absolutely, and my comment would be relevant to your both answers in terms of using the space and being flexible. The other day I went to a bar in one of very well-known hotels in London. I won't say the name. And the bar was absolutely packed, and they offered a different place within the hotel, which looked like a former conference room with lots of tables in it. But they didn't change anything about that except putting tables. It wasn't such a pleasant experience in terms of ambiance, and they really lost me as a customer on that point. So yes, being flexible, but also knowing what you do. People still come for the experience, not just that one drink or a dinner maybe.
I think you hit a very important chord here, because everyone has a different perception of what's safe and what's not. So that's one of the challenges our industry will face. Some of our guests will be more risk adverse as others, and how you manage that. I think that expectation and guest experience is going to be key here.
Absolutely. I guess you'll have to learn it by observing. That's the only way. All right. And as you know, we have an option of our attendees to submit a question while registering. And there was a question that I thought would be quite relevant to the discussion here. And it concerns the growth areas. Post-COVID, where is the growth going to be on the luxury or 3-4 star hotel food and beverage offering?
May I take that one, Nick? You good with that? Just for the beginning, please chime in if you disagree. We may be slightly biased here because we're both operating in the luxury sphere. But jokes aside, I think in general, restaurants and bars, may it be in luxury hotels, lifestyle hotels, freestanding restaurants and bars, you'll see an absolute surge as markets open up, right? And being here in Singapore at the moment, it's impossible to get a reservation. You really have to book 3 weeks in advance or 4 weeks in advance. Some restaurants book out within 3 minutes. And you end up sort of in a Sunday afternoon trying to book a restaurant. So, I see the future is bright for food and beverage. It's really how you're able to attract guests to come to you versus the competitor. And that's reaching out to making sure you're attracting locals as more than ever. We're heavily reliant on our local guests and not just our hotel guests. And to be successful in a market, you need to attract the locals. This is nothing new. This is something that's I think have been identified for years, or if not a decade now already. But yeah, that's something which I see as a general trend, because people have been at home for a long time. They want to go out and experience. So how do you get that business through your doors instead of the competitor's door? Is basically down to quality, as well as experiences and special touches like generosity. Thank you.
So did I understand you correctly that the future is especially bright for luxury hotels?
No, I think it's general. I think it's not just luxury hotels, but I think it's to every sort of segment and tier.
Thank you, Nicola. What's your view on that?
I think it's I agree with Philip. There's going to be an increase in every kind of segment, right? But what people are really looking about now, it's I think the lifestyle experience, right? And there is, as you mentioned, right, there is nothing new to that, right? Jan Schrager in the 1980s, when he built the Standard Hotel, right, was already thinking about that, right? So, but when you are a guest, right, you want to experience the local thing, right? And you want to be mixed with the 10 a.m. lawyer that's going to have his coffee with the grandfather that's going to eat a croissant in the morning, right? And that's what you want to try to achieve, right? As an owner or as an operator, right? It's to create that, local experience, and to have all these people gathered together, right? An hotel is not only something working from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., I would say, or to 8 a.m., right? It's something that needs to live all day long as well, right? And by doing that lifestyle experience, you can gain and develop that a little bit more.
Absolutely. Though the question was, I'm just working here on behalf of the person who asked it, whose chances to lure all those loyal, maybe new clients are better, the luxury style hotels or, 3-4 stars hotels? Who will benefit from exiting that stage?
I mean, looking at from the luxury segment and how we experience, markets like Hong Kong, which is still somewhat restricted right now, or, markets like Tokyo, which is still under a state of emergency, we see the luxury restaurants, our Michelin style, more refined dining as successful. You see people coming out to find occasions to celebrate or to make up on celebrations that were spent at home instead of out wining and dining. So we do see that. We also see an average check increase on per region, and this is a phenomenon we see everywhere. So that means that people are going out and spending. So from a luxury lens, I think the time is now to be able to capture whatever you can as markets reopen. So I hope that answers the question a bit better.
Absolutely. And I hope the person who asked it is very, very happy now. The next question, again from the attendee, is about prospects of adopting dynamic pricing. Maybe you've already done it or tried it. Please share your experience. Nicolas?
So when you mention dynamic price, you mean changing the price depending on the time of the day and all those kinds of things?
On many different circumstances, yes. Okay. Being dynamic and flexible with your prices.
Yeah, I think that we need to be a little bit careful with that, and we can use that for sure, and but it needs to be in certain time and certain period, right? And I will give you a clear example. When I was a restaurant GM in LA, I had that timing of the year where you, for example, doing New Year's Eve, right? And for your New Year's Eve, everybody wants to come at 9 p.m., right? Because everybody wants to be there at midnight, right? To be with you, to sing and to enjoy and to have fun, right? But nobody wants to come at 6, right? Because at 6 it's boring and there is nothing to do, right? And so at that time of the year, for example, it was interesting as a business owner, as a restaurant manager, to implement, two different price, right? One for at 6 p.m. where you're going to drive maybe a certain person that don't want to be there at midnight to enjoy midnight, but we want to just maybe go outside to have a little dinner with their family, and then after go back home or see the fireworks and all those kind of things, right? So on those certain period and certain time, I think it's great to do those dynamic. The rest of the week or the rest of the year, I'm not quite sure at this time, but maybe this is something to think about, maybe more in depth for sure.
Thank you. Philip?
I think that is an absolutely great question. Whoever asked that question, fantastic. Absolutely, we do this. We do this in our not in all markets, but we do it in our market, for example, in China, and we combine it with e-commerce. So we do have dynamic pricing, limited though, to build a base in our restaurants. As you know, mentalities, Asia, at least in Asian mentalities, I speak from an Asian lens here. A full restaurant is a good restaurant, right? So we look at, and also, from a business perspective, you want to have full restaurants, right? There's always the opportunity of incremental spend of our guests. So we do use that in our hotels, in our China properties and some other locations as well, where we use our e-commerce platforms, and in this case, WeChat, where we can drive more volume in our restaurants, and cap it so that we build a base and then try to yield up from there. So we do this. This is something. I see this has huge legs. Now, this is not for every restaurant, right? In our 3-star Michelin restaurants here in Asia Pacific, that's not going to happen. But in some of our 3-meal restaurants, or I would see potentially for certain meal periods where we want to drive more traffic. Absolutely, this is something we look at actively and we practice.
Excellent, thank you. It's good to know how you are applying all these new things that coming our way, and how are you actually flexible. So you do what you preach, or you preached a little bit earlier about flexibility. Speaking of the questions, I'm talking now to our audience. I see quite a few questions that been already asked, but may I encourage you to vote for the questions maybe your fellow attendees asked. This way I will see the most popular question and will be able to ask, to put it to Nicolas and Philip at the end of the webinar, because we won't be able to ask all of them, but I will ask a few most popular ones. Okay, we talked about strategy, we talked about money. Let's talk about creativity. What innovative dining format has most impressed you recently? Doesn't have to be yours, from your hotel, your company. Maybe you've seen it somewhere else. Please tell us.
Okay, so being a lot of in operation and dealing a lot with chef, in the last couple of years, I was quite impressed with the delivery and ghost kitchen system, for example, because 2 years ago, if you would have asked any chef in the world to put his dish in a plastic box, right, he would have never accepted, right, or will have hate you for the rest of your career, right? And you can tell, right, with this old COVID that came, and how people completely change and adapt and was flexible finally about what was going on, right? And you can see that people have changed their mindset about that, and it's a big market that it's gonna develop and continue to develop in the next couple of years, right? There is still things that we haven't looking into it, but I'm sure that there is still some good experience in terms of delivery, cooking, that we can do at home that what we didn't experience before, right?
Thank you, Philip.
And I don't mean this to be an advertising to Four Seasons, but I think what impressed me the most was what we did in Hong Kong, in our property in Hong Kong, and that was an in-room dining experience. And this was during sort of still pretty serious time of COVID, competing against a sea of hotels, an ocean of hotels in Hong Kong for staycation business, was how we elevated the in-room dining, and how we brought sort of new energy in that. So and not only that, but also it's two portion. One, how we delivered in-room dining. It wasn't just knock on the door and coming in and setting up the in-room dining setup and then leaving, but then having a coursed meal, right? So having a dining experience where the sommelier would come in with the champagne cards, and then, the digestive cards coming in towards the end of the meal, but then coming in tranches and giving that dining experience. And this was fairly at the beginning when staycations were coming back. It wasn't just in-room dining per se, but it was a whole culinary experience. That was one. The second piece, which I wanted to highlight, which I thought was brilliant, was how to elevate F&B experiences in the room. Especially when you're going on staycations, lots of people have family and small children, and to have activities like cookie decorating in your room, so the parents could have activities in their rooms, or simple things that can be done, but taking food and beverage in the center, I thought was brilliant. And that was make your own cocktails to getting a cocktail class through a QR code and a video, and being able to do the perfect Negroni in the room. I thought that was really innovative, and as well was highly well received by our guests, right? So they enjoyed it because it was an activity that couples and families could do together.
Thank you, Philip. There was a question again from attendees about room service experience. I was going to ask it at the end, but since you now mentioned the room experience, I will ask it now. But I will ask, because you sort of answered it already, I will ask our audience to react to this question. There is, as many of you can see, a chat going on. So please share your opinions, our attendees, because we are all part of this webinar. We can all interact and exchange our opinions. So the question was, how do you make room service breakfast exciting? So if our panelists want to answer it, you're welcome. But I encourage our attendees to answer these questions in the chat room. So, any ideas about the breakfast exciting when it is happening in your room? How to make it exciting, interesting, memorable?
So, do you want to talk, Philip? Or
go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that what's important is when you create that bespoke experience for the guests, right? When you are in a room service now, when you order room service, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, right? The room to arrive, we're coming from operation and we know exactly what it is, right? And we understand the difficulties of room service, right? But what can be done just slightly to have a better experience as a guest, I think, is that maybe those little touch, right? I think that when you order a cappuccino, for example, right, and this cappuccino come in your room wrapped with plastic on top, and then the foam is completely falling apart, and you don't have that great experience of drinking a cappuccino, right? So why not just bringing that, foam machine into your room, just plug it, take 2 minutes of your time as a server, right, and create that experience in front of the guest, while you're going to drop that little mousse on top of the coffee, right? Why not, bringing a toaster in front of the guest? Because we know, right? Normally when you receive your toast, sometimes they are not hot enough, or they kind of start to be wet, right? And you can try to give that better experience, right, by just bringing a toaster, right? Creating the toast in front of the guest, asking the guest, how do you want your toast to be cooked, right? Do you want them dark brown, light brown, right? And that creates directly another experience for the guest, right? So those are the little things, just couple of things that can completely change the experience of the guest, right? When you are a business guest, you don't want to wait 30 minutes for your room service order, but why not just creating a little box on your menu where you have a coffee and a muffin, right? That can be delivered in 5 minutes, right? Where your server can deliver that from room service, but also maybe your housekeeping team can just drop a coffee that she can do in the back of the office on the floor, right? So you can just drop a newspaper with it on a nice little bag that you just hang on your door. Now you just and it's how you're gonna adapt to the guest need, right, and create that little touch that guests are expecting, I would say.
You know what? I loved all what you said, Nicholas. I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel with breakfast, right? For us, keep it simple, keep it achievable. Make sure that it's delivered in perfect temperature. Breakfast in hotels, that in-room dining experience, what we achieve on a daily basis is of high quality. Yes, of course, at times we drop the ball, but I think it's making sure you get the basics right. Hot coffee hot, juices are cold and freshly pressed as well. I love Amelie's comment here is more croissants. And I think that, just the more croissants, it's the generosity piece, right? Making sure that if you provide a jam, it's, or if there's anything you want to highlight that ties you back to locality, if it's a local honey or a homemade jam or anything like that, that's what wows people. Maybe going an extra mile and say, hey, it's your last day, and you enjoyed this honey, here's a small pot for you to take home. I think that's more appealing than too much of the fanfare. I loved Antoine, who I know very well here, saying, grinding coffee beans in a room. Yes, that's brilliant. But if you have a 400 room hotel and you have to do that 80 times, that might be a bit unachievable. But the idea is phenomenal, right? And you might pick and choose and say, hey, this person we want to, this guest for XYZ reasons, they're on our honeymoon, or they're celebrating something. We can go the extra mile, and we can afford the extra time in there. By all means, do it, right? But yeah, I think getting the basics right, making sure you have a generous approach in terms of how you look at in-room dining, because we do charge for it, right?
So true. Simplicity and the quality are the key. I did like Emily's lots of croissants comment. That would definitely go well with my son. He would certainly remember that little touch, and as many croissants as possible. But my next question is now, I will make a little bridge from very many croissants, which is probably not very healthy, to a healthy theme. As a business, are you planning to capitalize on health and wellness inspired culinary trends, and which ones seem to you the most promising commercially? That's an important bit.
Maybe I start here, Nick.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think, it's healthy eating is not a new trend. This is something that's been around for a couple of years, right? And we see that importance growing year on year. It's something that's going to stay, and it's something I think got turbocharged now because of COVID. Everyone's looking. I guess there's two spectrums. People who are indulging a little bit more while they're at home, and the others which are really, trying to boost their immunity, trying to eat healthier, making sure that, their intake and counting their macros and on a daily basis, and making sure they exercise. So there's many trends, and that's a bit the difficulty in this. I feel that there's a lot on, vegan, vegetarian. There's different diet regimes you can follow. I think that the most important is that it needs to be factual. So, we're hoteliers, we're culinarians, we're not nutritionists. So I think the most important is working with partners to develop, a nutritional program for the properties. Now, I can take some of our examples we're doing, right? Like if I take the Maldives at Landa Giravaru, we have an Ayurvedic doctor who is on the resort. And when you come to the resort, you have a free consultation with this Ayurvedic doctor. And all our menus have all the symbols, the Ayurvedic symbols, and after your prognosis, you can follow a dietary program in all our restaurants in the Maldives, from in-room dining to our to our Lebanese restaurant, to our Italian restaurant, you name it, breakfast, even at buffet. So you can follow what you should or should not eat now. So that's one. But I do see and hey, with Daniel Hum announcing a vegan menu, a vegetarian menu, or a plant-forward menu in his restaurant. I see that as not a trend, but something that's here to stay. I think that the key point and the key difference is vegetarianism or veganism doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. So there's false pretext there. I've been to many vegetarian restaurants where I walked out and like, yeah, that wasn't quite so healthy. So I think the health component is important, and being getting the right advice for it.
Thank you. Nicolas?
Yeah, I think that Philippe, I think he kind of summed that up correctly, and there is nothing else to add into this. It's not from yesterday that people wants to be healthy, and so in all our hotels, we try to create that little menu where someone that someone is going to always ask for a vegan food or vegetarian item, right, that you don't have on the menu. So you just need to be proactive and ensure that you have that you kind of offer that experience to your guest, right? I kind of like the idea of vegan and vegetarian food, right? Because I clearly think that people like to eat more and more plant-based product with non-animal, I would say. And if we talk about luxury, we have seen that in the Michelin Guide, right? For example, in France, right, about a year ago, 2 years ago, near Bordeaux, it was the first vegan, Michelin star restaurant from a Claire Valley, for example, right? So I kind of think that the Michelin Guide is taking that into consideration. We have seen that also in Beijing, right? When in 2020 we had the 2 Michelin star restaurants, right? For the restaurant was King Joy, I think, Philip. It's those kind of example, right, where I think that we're gonna see more and more in the future. But nowadays the most important is to have those things available if guests ask, and to be able to create that bespoke experience if people ask in advance, right, for special events or special dinner, right?
Absolutely. The second part of the question was, which of those trends, if you have data on this, if you have any insights on this, is the most promising commercially? Yes, they are offered in the restaurants, but are they actually commercially viable or attractive to you as a business?
Absolutely. And this is just generalizing, right? Compared to some proteins, vegetables are less expensive, right? So from a profit perspective, they are more profitable. Doesn't mean that it's lesser of quality, or that we're cheating our guests. That's far from it, because the process that goes behind it and the techniques applied doesn't need to be inexpensive, so or of lesser quality. So, but I think it absolutely makes sense. The flip side to this is that you can't our guests are not stupid, right? So they need to feel like this is something worth it. This is something good for me, and thinking of having a boiled asparagus as a dish is sort of yesterday's strategy. So I think it needs to be something that's exciting, and something innovative, something you cannot do at home necessarily, and something that is delicious.
We're going to talk a little bit more about beverage, because we talk about food a lot, but not about beverage. So, I'm going to take one example, and I think it's going to be clear for everyone, right? When you have, for example, a virgin mojito on your menu, right? You're going to say, oh, Yeah, you're gonna sell that Virgin Mojito 10 euros instead of a normal cocktail 15 or 20 euros, right? But maybe the guest is gonna take 2 or 3 Virgin Mojito. He's gonna come with a friend, and then he's gonna spend more time at your bar. And if you spend more time at your bar, he might take a little snack, right? And then you can start a conversation with those people, right? Maybe you can show them the different outlets. You build that loyalty, that connection with the guest, and maybe this guy's going to come back the next day or the week after with his family and the week after with his friend, right? So I clearly think that there is opportunity. We just need to be smart about it and how we're going to react to that, right? And I think that the example that I give it clearly sum up and give a great illustration about it, right?
Precisely. Opportunities are there, even in crisis, and it's up to us to take advantage of them or not. But as far as I can see, you are taking advantages and capitalizing on the opportunities. Another question is about younger generations, maybe those who now prefer to drink less alcohol, maybe not. So the question is, what do younger generations prefer to eat and drink? Are there any differences? And again, if there are, how are you taking advantage of those?
Wow, that's a great question. It's also a very broad question. So please, Nick, chime in. I think, now taking the beverage example, right? I think it's the golden age of cocktail. It's been the golden age of cocktail for the last 6-7 years. I think we see that shift from, more heavier cocktails, more potent, stronger in alcohol to lower ABV, which is nice, or non-alcoholic cocktails. This is also nothing really new, but we also see the trend of portability. So taking away that cocktail may be, in a larger format bottle and having that same cocktail from your favorite cocktail bar at home. So what we do see, especially in the younger generation, is that everyone's a foodie. Everyone, uses social media and we can argue about if it's good or bad, but yes, everyone is knowledgeable. Everyone, there's so much content out there. It's a bit content overload. So, I think what appeals to the younger generation is the storytelling component, making sure that there's authenticity behind it, tying it to locality, to ingredients, to a meaningful story, which is also not new. But I think the attractiveness to the newer generation is how it's presented and how photogenic it is, right? So the movement of snapping before eating, obviously overplayed in APAC, in the APAC market, but really it's a global phenomenon where people take photos of food. So, there's a book, Generation Yum, where it really talks about the younger generation yearning experiences. They might not be able to afford going to a fine dining restaurant on a weekly basis, but they will save up for it to go and, have that $25 ramen noodle, which we're selling in Macau with, a huge lobster tail in it, to be able to take that photo and say, I'm part of this, and I want to showcase this.
Absolutely. I liked snapping before eating wording. This is the scene I'm guilty of a little bit, which probably makes me younger, so I'm okay with that. Nicolas, would you like to share something on that?
Yeah, I agree with Philip. The younger generation wants to drink less, but better, for sure. They are way more knowledgeable than maybe we were 15 or 20 years ago. They have, directly, the information that they need because all about all the social media and everything. So they are aware of the product. They are aware of what they're going to drink. They are aware of the cocktail that they're going to take, and they know exactly, right? our job is to create that little storytelling behind that, right? And to embrace our guests into that, philosophy of local product, seasonality, ingredients, special ingredients, right? So that's our job, I would say, as an operator, is to kind of create that little plus for the guest, to ensure that they come back, after all.
Absolutely.
May I add one point there? And this is what's worked for us. And so, we have great partners. And what we did was, coming back to cocktails and beverage, and I'm glad Nick brought that up, right? We have our spirit program is, we use Eco Spirits, which is a system where we buy larger format bottles of spirits, from 4.5 liters up to 20 liters. So we reduce waste by, from it being shipped from Europe to Asia, as well as packaging, right? Because we don't have all these glass bottles. We minimize our waste by 90%, by implementing eco spirits, and that's our well spirits. So the most spirits we sell is through the well, and it's a great story, and it appeals to multiple generations, not just the young generation. It appeals to my parents' generation as well. But having that meaningful sort of spin to a story is highly impactful.
So true. Picking up on the storytelling that you both mentioned, I think we can summarize that these days, food and beverage, it's not just food or substance for your stomach, but very much for your mind as well. You give a story, and first of all, it's your mind that processes it. And then you decide whether you will go ahead with this product offering, with this food or with this beverage or not. Not just, because you're hungry. And I think this is a major change that could be observed in behavior of people these days and their approach to food and beverage in general. Well, now I will ask my last question before we proceed to the questions from the audience. It is last but certainly not least of my questions. As some of you probably heard or read on my LinkedIn post, the other day I went out for a meal to the UK's second oldest pub. It claims to have served its first pint of beer in 1096. On the wall of the pub, they proudly display a list of its owners going all the way back to 1498. Apart from wondering how beer tasted back then, I was really impressed with the fact that these premises managed to stay in place as a business for almost 1,000 years. So my question is, what do you need to do to stay relevant and consistently deliver high quality service so as to last in the industry for the next 1,000 years, or at least half of this time?
Wow. Great anecdote. I actually am quite curious of how a beer tasted in 10, very early on. Hopefully it's as good and cold as one is today. I guess, there's two flip sides to this, right? Either you're an institution, and, don't change a thing, just keep up and upkeep. And there's numerous of these restaurants, globally and in our hotels and outside of our hotels that are absolute institutions, right? I love to take an example of the Kronenhalle in Zurich, right? Every time I'm in Zurich, I will have a veal Zurichoise with rösti there. It's been there for decades. It's the same recipe, and the restaurant, you walk in there and you have beautiful artwork and it's fantastic. Now, if you have restaurants like that, please don't change, right? People come back. I mean, every time I go back to Zurich, that's where I will have at least one meal. But then, I think it's important to realize, like, if concepts don't work, that you need to adapt and change, right? And there's the rule of thumb saying that a concept's lifespan is between 5 and 7 years, and at times that is true in our hotels. But if you look at the freestanding restaurants, in markets where rents are astronomically high, New York, London, Hong Kong, if you don't make it within the first 18 months, you're out. And you can see it, right? Like, and you go to these cities and you see one or two empty tables, you're like, yeah, maybe they won't make it. I hope they do, right? But being able to have that flexibility to change, and I think there's two things to be able to do that is to bring down some of the construction costs of these restaurants and bars, and that's something we need to work on with our colleagues in design and construction, so that we have that opportunity to flip a concept if it doesn't work or if it's not locally relevant. So I think there's two sides, right? Like, if you're an institution and you've made it to that status, congratulations, don't change a thing. But if you have a restaurant that's low in occupancy in seat covers per meal period, then consider something that's more relevant.
Thank you. Nicolas, what's your take on that?
So to respond to your question, why this pub is so successful so many years after, and what to do to ensure that it continues, and how as an operator and an owner we can do to drive that. The response is very easy from my opinion. I think that we don't have to reinvent our beautiful industry, right? I'm pretty sure that if I go to this pub, I'm sure that I'm going to be greeted with kindness, generosity, local product. I'm going to almost be feeling at home, right? Right? And I'm sure that this person create that a kind of experience for the locals, right? To ensure that each time they come, they are recognized by their name, that we know their drink, we know exactly what they like, what kind of snacks, what's the name of the dog, what's the name of the children, right? And people like that, right? To feel like if they were just talking to a friend, or feel like they were at home, right? And I'm sure that this pub was not just selling beer. It was selling way more than that, and I think I gave you great examples such as generosity and kindness, right?
Absolutely, Nicolas. Actually, your answer resonates very well with my experience, where in the local restaurant, they used to serve my favorite cocktail, but then they stopped doing it. But because manager remembered that was a cocktail of my choice, even when it was off the menu, and it is still off the menu, he always offers it to me, always serves it to me, always remembers that I like it. And of course, that means that I will be there over and over again, because they, as you said, recognize my preferences and make this experience really personalized for me. And now the next question from the audience. And because Philip just mentioned, touched upon concepts, I would like to put it to you right now. What are your top 3 challenges when creating and developing new F&B concepts? Like Philip, you said, if your concept is not working, change it. So what, in your understanding, or your experience rather, will be those 3 challenges, or maybe more, that you might face?
That's a great question. So when developing concepts, I think it's important to do the groundwork, right? If you're opening, for example, a pizzeria in a market which has 6 excellent pizzerias, unless you can reinvent the wheel with pizzas, that probably would not go down too well. So making sure you know your local market, number one, making sure you know what the locals like to eat, and then at times, making sure you're bringing something new to market that may or may not be acceptable to your local clientele, right? So I think that's a bit the finesse in developing concepts is maybe having that foresight and working with stakeholders. Not just the ownership group, but also, local foodies, making sure you speak to enough people from that industry in that locality, from the industry, people who travel there a lot, what's sort of missing, and so that I think is one. And then the third one, of course, is managing expectations of ownership groups, right? Like some owners are very adamant of what they want in their hotel, and at times they're right. So, but also at times they're incorrect, right? And I want to mention this example, and this is not, I won't mention the brand or whatever, but an ownership group wanted to have a sushi restaurant in a location which was the furthest point away from any ocean, right? So having a sushi restaurant, to a high-end, sushi restaurant in that location is sheer impossible, because you can't get the fresh produce. There's no direct link to Tokyo, so it was really difficult to implement. So you have to. There's a lot of moving parts there. But yeah, that in general would be my advice there.
Thank you, Philip. Nicola, what's your advice on that?
This is a question that we have been asked a lot of time, especially when you go to school and then you share with students. This kind of question is sometimes coming a lot of time, right? So, and I think it's a great question because it's kind of 50% of our job, right? Creating and developing and doing new concepts. I will focus on three things. First one is understand the city, right? You have to take the plane and go to the city, right? I'm currently in the middle of the vineyard, right? In Tuscany, Italy. We need to feel the environment, feel the vibe, right? And I'm going to mention Jan Schrager again. He was saying you cannot create a great F&B concept without driving all night in a cabriolet, right? Because that's where you kind of feel the environment, you feel the vibe, you feel the city itself, right? And that's very, very important, I kind of feel, right? Because you go to Prague or you go to London or you go to Madrid, needs is completely different, right? So that's very, very, very important, I would say. The second thing is, ensure that your vision meet with the business needs, right? And sometimes when you go on a rooftop, you imagine doing a beautiful pool, a nice bar, and all those kind of things. And then when you talk to the design and technical services, they tell you, unfortunately, this is not something that we can create, right? So you have to make sure that what you imagine for that future hotel or for that future restaurant match with the different restriction of the building, with the law that you have in the city, right? And those things are sometimes not easy to manage because they are completely different where you go, right? And then the last advice that I will give is that don't try to please everyone, right? Do one thing, but do it great. Sometimes I'm saying, okay, we're going to do a patisserie. Oh yeah, what are you going to sell in your patisserie? 10, 20, 30 different products. No, I'm going to sell one, but I'm going to be the best in town. Everybody's going to come every day, and I'm going to have a line of 200 or 300 person waiting for that croissant to come up from the oven, just hot at the right temperature, wrapped up in a nice packaging with the logo of the hotel. And that croissant is going to drive all day long into the city, right? And I'm going to have the best marketing in town, right? So that will be my last advice, right? Don't try to please everyone. Just make sure that you create one thing, but be the best.
So agree, and you can't please everyone. We are old enough to know that. So stick to your niche, stick to what you know the best. And now the questions in our Ask a Question section. I will ask the most popular one, and I'm not surprised to see why it is the most popular one. It's the most difficult one, and at all our webinars, the focused questions are the most popular ones because everyone wants to know the future, because no one can predict it. We even have a joke among our attendees and webinar panelists that every time we predict something, it's wrong. The next webinar, we find out that it is wrong. but we still play this business of predicting just because people keep asking us. So the question is, looking to medium, 3 to 5 years, and a long-term, 5 years plus, how do you see the food and beverage landscape? I'm quoting here the phrasing and the wording.
So just short term, I think we need to get rid of this COVID this COVID virus, and we better do it before the next 3 years, or we might not all be sitting here as our industry is suffering. So I think the successful restaurants are the restaurants or restaurants and bars that have a unique position, have an experience to offer, and are somewhat institutionalized, or are fresh concepts. I see the pivot to healthier eating, more plant forward. I think that's over the last couple of years something we see. I think this is going to turbocharge now, and it's really who can. And I'm not saying everyone needs to have a vegetarian restaurant. I think hotels and restaurants need to have more options for people with dietary restrictions, and that's something I see in the near future. As for long term, I like I mentioned before, e-commerce, how we approach booking, marketing, and selling restaurants, I think will change drastically. And pandemics like this, like I mentioned before, are beautiful, right? Because you see, 10 years ago, you would never think of selling anything online that is food and beverage related. And look at our business today in a crisis where we're really relying on it to drive turnover, right? So I think that's something which I'll see. And there's different facets to it, right? Gamification of e-commerce, making that an experience where now it's highly transactional. When you look at like the likes of Uber Eats or Deliveroo, it's highly transactional. How can you make it more, an experience? Thank you,
Nicolas.
I'm going to continue to talk about concept and trends, and I'm just gonna add on what Philip just said. I think that we're going to be more and more precise on what we're going to offer in terms of experience, in terms of food and beverage experience. Now we say, okay, we're going to do an Asian restaurant, we're going to do a French restaurant, we're going to do those things, right? Now people are expecting way more than that, right? They expect to have a restaurant not coming from only from South Asia, but coming from a particular city, right? Because every single city has its authenticity, has its own product, has its own way of doing things, right? You're not gonna have a French restaurant. You're gonna have a restaurant specialized in fish coming from Mediterranean only, right? So we're gonna be more and more precise, and I agree with what Phil just said about dietary restriction. Is going to be a big component of what's going to happen in the near future. Yes, for sure.
A small additional question to what you both have just mentioned. It's in our again ask a question session. Should online delivery be encouraged? I think what is meant by this question is whether you see any conflict between having guests who like having their meal in the restaurant and those who now keep ordering online, and if there is a conflict, how do you resolve it as a business? Are you going to encourage delivery product offering, or you will go back to what you were doing before the COVID? Yeah,
great question. I think, and this is sort of my point of view on this. And also how we deal with it at Four Seasons. So we do have takeaway, but we don't have everything on takeaway because some food doesn't travel well. Like having a Michelin star experience on takeaway is just not Michelin star experience, because food is not served at the right temperature. It's not served immediately. It may not travel well. So we do look at what we do for takeaway, and then we try to do that really, really well to the best of our abilities. And for example, the takeaway afternoon tea on, I think, Mother's Day, we sold 450 in one of our hotels in one day, and then on the same day in a similar hotel on the other side of the world, we sold 350. So it's like it works, right? So it's the experience of afternoon tea, but it's not it's not necessarily a super fine dining experience. That's one. Second, at Four Seasons, we do not partner with third-party delivery services for the simple fact that it's not a luxury experience. It's not a Four Seasons experience. So we encourage our guests to either pick it up themselves or we deliver it for you, obviously for a fee. So it's really a Four Seasons experience. Now, in some of the worst hit cities, for example, in Bangalore, we've been driving significant revenue through our takeaway business, and we deliver it by ourselves. And in a market which has such high COVID cases, our employees are invited in the house to consume, to have a glass of water before they go back to the hotel because of our health and safety practices, because it's a personalized experience in the delivery, and we're sticking to our guns to it, right? So we do it, but we do it our way, in a more refined way, and it works well, right? Our guests appreciate it.
Wonderful. Nicolas?
I think that people, by staying at home for a long time, have discovered a lot about the recipe. They have been, informed about products. So, of course, they want to go back to the restaurant because they also have seen that, maybe it was difficult to cook for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for 7 days a week, right? So they want to go back as well to restaurant to see those things. But, regarding delivery, I think that we haven't finished. There is still some few things to do. And I will give you an example that I really like. About a month or 2 months ago, I ordered something through a Michelin star chef in Paris. And what was quite interesting is that, of course, he couldn't deliver that Michelin star experience to your table because, as Phil mentioned, difficult in terms of temperature and all those kind of thing and presentation to ensure that you have the best experience, right? But what he was doing is that, he was giving you everything in kits, kind of, right? Where and at the end you have to assemble everything by yourself. So you were bringing your friends, your family into the kitchen, and you were finalizing those, beautiful dishes with your friends, right? And you were kind of playing the 3 Michelin star chef at home, right? And so you were taking picture of all those things, and at the end you were comparing, there was all those recipe going on with everything, right? Everything was detailed. It was super, at the end, easy to manage, right? And at the end, when you were comparing the 3 Michelin star plate with yours, at the end, you didn't feel that there was so much difference, kind of, right? So you were kind of proud of you because you were acting like a 3 Michelin star chef at home, right? So that's why I'm saying, I'm quite sure that, the delivery experience are still some things that we have to learn from. And there is still few things that we have to consider, right? But as a general experience, we need to be very humble about all of that, right? It's new for everyone, right? And all those new things, we're gonna create them and build them all together, I feel, right?
What an experience it is! What a positive experience it is to be a Michelin star in your own home. If you can't have it at home, have him at home, be a Michelin star chef yourself. I love it. Well, on this wonderful note, we are coming to the end of our webinar today. It was very informative and insightful, exactly as our audience likes it to be. A big thank you to you, Philip and Nicolas, for being our panelists today and sharing your knowledge and expertise. It was a great pleasure hosting you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, I would like to thank our audience for choosing to spend the afternoon with us and engaging in this conversation both before and during the event. I'm wishing you all a wonderful day, evening, or maybe morning for some. And as always, looking forward to seeing you again at our future events. Thank you
Thank you,
again.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.